Shalom. Figured I would share some different things here. Gonna go into the uh, book of Bel and the Dragon. Uh, it's the history of the destruction of Bel. All right. Um, Also, I will go into Daniel as well. Some information on Daniel and the Josephus. All right. Concerning Daniel. All right. And the different wows or um, manifestations or visitations of uh, Bel, Satan, whatever you want to call the enemy. Um, so, Bel and the Dragon, verse 2 says, "And Daniel conversed with the king and was honored. He was respected above all his friends. Now the Babylonians had an idol called Bel, and there were spent upon him every day 12 great measures of fine flour, and 40 sheep, and 6 vessels of wine. And the king worshipped it, and went daily to adore it, to honor it. But Daniel worshipped his own power, God. And the king said unto him, to Daniel, Why doeth not you worship Bel? Right? So he's asking Daniel, an Israelite, why don't he worship Bel, Satan? 5. Who answered and said, Because I may not worship idols made with hands, but the living power, the living God, Ahiah, who have created the heaven, the sky, and the earth, the world, and have sovereignty over all flesh, rulership over all body. Then said the king unto him, Thinkest you not that Bel is a living power, is a living God? Seeth you not how much he eateth? He said, Don't you see how much he eateth, Daniel, and drinketh every day? Then Daniel smiled and said, O king, be not deceived, be not fooled, for this is but clay within, inside, and brass without, brass on the outside, and did never eat or drink anything. All right. Verse 8. So the king was wroth, he was angry, and called for his priests, right? And said unto them, If ye tell me not who this that devoureth these expenses, ye shall die. All right. So again, it says, So the king was mad and called for his priests and said unto them, If ye tell me not who this is that devoureth or consume these expenses, ye will die. But if you can certify me that Bel devoureth them, then Daniel shall die. For ye have spoken blasphemy against Bel, Satan. And Daniel said unto the king, Let it be according to your word. Now the priests of Bel were 60 and 10, beside their wives and children. And the king went with Daniel into the temple of Bel. So Bel's priest said, Look, we go out, but you, O king, set on the meat, and make ready the wine, and shut the door fast, and seal it, close it, lock it, with thine own signet, his ring. And tomorrow when you cometh in, if you findeth not that Bel have eaten up all, we will suffer death, or else Daniel that speaketh falsely against us. And they little regarded it, for under the table they had made a private entrance. Under the table they made a secret entrance, whereby they entered, they went in continually and consumed those things. They devoured those things. They ate those things. So when they were gone out, the king set meats before Bel, the idol. Now Daniel had commanded his servants to bring ashes, and those they strewed throughout all the temple. They scattered through all the temple in the presence of the king, in front of the king alone. Then went they out and shut the door and sealed it. They locked it, closed it with the king's signet, and so departed. They left. Now in the night came the priests with their wives and children, and did eat and drink up all. In the morning, betime, early morning, the king arose, and Daniel with him. The king said, Daniel, are the seals whole? Are they still complete, unbroken? And he said, yeah, O king, they be whole, they're complete, they're locked. And soon as he had opened the door, the king looked upon the table and cried with a loud voice, great are you, O Bel, and with thee is no deceit at all. Then laughed Daniel and held the king that he should not go in. He said, wait a minute, and said, behold, look, now the pavement, the ground, look at the ground and mark well, remember well, whose footsteps are these? And the king said, I see the footsteps of men, women, and children. And then the king was angry. He was upset. And took the priests with their wives and children, who showed him the privy, the hidden or secret doors, where they came in and consumed. They ate such things as were upon the table. Therefore the king killed them and delivered Bel into Daniel's power, who destroyed him and his temple. And in that same place there was a great dragon, which they of Babylon worshipped. And the king said unto Daniel, will you also say that this is of brass? Lo, he liveth. Look, he lives. He eateth and drinketh. You cannot say that he is no living power. Therefore worship him. Then said Daniel unto the king, I will worship the Most High, my power, Ahia, for he is the living power. He is the living God. He is the highest, the Ancient of Days. But give me leave, O king. Allow me, O king, and I will slay this dragon without sword or staff. The king said, I give you leave, allowance. Then Daniel took pitch and fat and hair and did seethe them together and made lumps of it, the pitch, fat, and hair. All right. This he put in the dragon's mouth, and so the dragon burst in sunder. It bust in half. And Daniel said, behold what you worship. He said, look, these are the gods, these are the powers you worship, to the king. And when they of Babylon heard that, they took great indignation. All right. And conspired, they planned against the king, saying, the king is become a Jew, an Israelite, or convert, and he have destroyed Bel. He have slain the dragon, and put the priest to death. They're like, well, you doing this. You killed um the dragon and the priests and Bel. All right. 29. So they came to the king. All right. Or the president. In our time, there would be the president, right? So they came to the king and said, deliver us Daniel. Give us Daniel, king, or else we will destroy you and your house. All right. Now, when the king saw that they pressed him sore, being constrained, he gave up Daniel unto them, who cast him into the lion's den. They threw him in the lion's den, where he was 6 days. So, in the Josephus, I'm gonna go over the lion's den, but and we all read Daniel, all right. Who threw him into the lion's den, where he was 6 days. And in the den there were 7 lions, Israel, and they had given them every day 2 carcasses, that means 2 slaves, and 2 sheep, which then were not given to them. So they didn't give them their food on purpose, to the intent that they might devour Daniel, that they might eat Daniel, right? Now there was in Jewry a prophet called Habakkuk, who had made or sodded pottage, and had broken bread in a bowl, and was going into the field for to bring it to the reapers. But the angel, the messenger of the Most High, said unto Habakkuk, go carry the dinner that you have into Babylon unto Daniel, who is in the lion's den. And Habakkuk the prophet said, Lord, I never saw Babylon, neither do I know where the den is. I don't even know the location. That's what he said. He says, then the angel, the messenger of the Most High, took him by the crown and bare him. He took him by his head and carried him by the hair of his head, and through the vehemency of his spirit set him in Babylon over the den. And Habakkuk cried, saying, O Daniel, Daniel, take the dinner which the Most High have sent you. And Daniel said, you have remembered me, O Most High Power, neither have you forsaken them that seek you and love you. You'll never leave those that seek him and love him. 39. So Daniel arose and did eat. He got up and ate. And the messenger of the Most High set Habakkuk in his own place again immediately. Upon the 7th day, the king went to bewail Daniel. On the 7th day, he went to cry for Daniel. And when he came to the den, he looked in. And behold, look, Daniel was sitting. Then cried the king with a loud voice, saying, great art thou, O Most High, of Daniel, and there is none other besides thee. There is none other besides the Lord of spirits, the Ancient of Days, Ahia, the highest. And he drew him out. He took him out and threw those that were the reason of his destruction into the den. He threw those that caused his destruction to inside the den, and they were devoured or destroyed in a moment, right? Because they was hungry, but they wasn't hungry for Daniel, because the Most High Spirit was with him. His eyes was on Daniel. All right. So they um, were devoured in a moment before his face. All right. So Daniel destroyed Bel and the dragon and the false prophets. All right, or priests. I mean. right? And the king worshiped the Most High, or he knew who, he found out who is the Most High, who is the highest. All right, so that's it on Bel and the Dragon. All right, so now um, I'll go into the Josephus. I'm in book 10 of the Antiquities of the Jews, chapter 10, verse 1. All right. Concerning Daniel and what befell him at Babylon. All right. But now Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, took some of the most noble of the Jews, the Israelites, that were children. All right. And the kinsmen of Zedekiah, the family of Zedekiah, their king, such as were remarkable for their beauty of their bodies and comeliness, the handsomeness of their countenance, that means faces, and delivered them into the hands of tutors and to the improvement to be made by them. He also made some of them to be eunuchs, which course he took also with those of other nations, other people, whom he had taken in the flower of their age, the youngness of their age. So he made them eunuchs, and I didn't know Daniel was one. But when you read that, you understand. It said he had taken in the flower of their age, their time, and afforded them their diet from his own table, and had them instructed in the institutes, the universities, basically, the institutes of the country, the schools of their country, and taught the learning of the Chaldeans. All right. The learnings of the Chaldeans, that's where Abraham's father and them were from. And they were wise. They were sages. But anyway, and they had now exercised themselves sufficiently in that wisdom, that understanding, which he had ordered that they should apply themselves to. Now among these there were 4 of the family of Zedekiah, of most excellent dispositions, the one of whom was called Daniel. Another was called Ananias, another Mishael, and the 4th Azarias. So their Babylonian names are Meshach, um, Shadrach, and Abednego. All right. And it says, and the king of Babylon changed their names and commanded that they should make use of other names. Daniel he called Belshazzar, Ananias Shadrach, Mishael Meshach, and Azarias Abednego. These the king had esteemed and continued to love because of the very excellent temper, attitude, mind they were of, all right, and because of their application to learning and the progress they had made in wisdom, knowledge, understanding. Now Daniel and his kinsmen, his family, had resolved to use a severe diet and to abstain from those kinds of food which came from the king's table, and entirely to forbid to eat of all living creatures. So he came to Aspen's, who was that eunuch to whom the care of them was committed. All right. And desired him to take and spend what was brought for them from the king, but to give them pulse and dates for their food, and anything else besides the flesh, the body of living creatures, that he pleased, for that their inclinations, their thoughts were to that sort of food, their mind was to that sort of food, and that they despised, they hated the other. He replied, he answered that he was ready to serve them in what they desired, what they wanted, for he suspected that they would be discovered found by the king from the meager bodies and the alteration of their faces, because it could not be avoided, but their bodies and colors must be changed with their diet, especially while they would be clearly discovered found by the finer appearance of the other children, who would fare better. And now they should bring him into danger and occasion him to be punished. Still did they persuade Irach, who was now fearful to give them what food they wanted for 10 days, by way of trial, and in case the habit of their bodies were not altered, changed to go on in the same way, as expecting they should not be hurt thereby afterwards. But if he saw them looking meager, weak, and worse than the rest, he should reduce them to the former diet. Now, when it appeared that they were so far from becoming worse, weak, by the use of this food, that they grew plumper and fuller in body than the rest, and so much that he thought those who fed on what came from the king's table seemed less plump and full, while those that were with Daniel looked as if they had lived in plenty and in all sorts of luxury. Irach from that time securely took himself what the king sent every day from his supper dinner, according to the custom, the law, to the children, but gave them the aforementioned diet, vegetables, all right, while they had their souls in some measure more pure and less burdened. So while they had their souls, their spirits in some measure more pure, more clean, and less burdened, less troubled, and so fitter for learning, and had their bodies in better trim for hard labor work, for they neither had the former oppressed and heavy with variety of meats, nor were the other effeminate on the same reason. So they readily understood all the learning that was among the Hebrews and among the Chaldeans, especially did Daniel, who being already sufficiently skilled in wisdom, was very busy about the interpretation of dreams. And the Most High manifest himself to him. All right. So Daniel was busy trying to understand dreams. Now, 2 years after the destruction of Egypt, King Nebuchadnezzar saw a wonderful dream, the accomplishment of which the Most High showed him in his sleep. But when he arose, when he woke up out, or he got up out of his bed, he forgot the accomplishment. So he sent for the Chaldeans and the magicians and the prophets and told them that he had seen a dream and informed them that he had forgot the accomplishment of what he had seen. And he asked them to tell him both what the dream was and what was its significance. Um, I'm sorry, signification. I'm sorry. And they said that this was a thing impossible to discover, to find by men. But they promised him that if he would explain to them what dream he had seen, they would tell him its signification. Whereupon he threatened to put them to death to kill him, unless they told him his dream. And he gave command. He demanded to have them all put to death, since they confessed they could not do what they were commanded to do. Now, when Daniel was listening, that the king had given a demand that all the wise men should be killed, put to death, and that among them himself and his three kinsmen, his family, were in danger, he went to Arach, who was captain of the king's guard, and desired to know of him what was the reason why the king had given command that all the wise men And the Chaldeans supposedly they were like astronomers and all of that, real wise. And the magicians should be killed. So when he had learned that the king had had a dream and had forgotten it, and that when they were enjoined asked to inform the king of it, they had said they could not do it, and had thereby caused him to anger. And he desired of Arach that he would go into the king and desire respite, mercy for the magicians for one night, and to put off their slaughter, their killing so long, for that he hoped within that time to obtain, to receive by prayer to the Most High the knowledge of the dream. Accordingly, Arach informed the king of what Daniel desired, what he wanted. So the king bid allow them delay the slaughter of the magicians till he knew what Daniel's promise would come to. But the young man retired to his own house with his kinsmen, and he asked the Most High that whole night to find the dream, or to discover the dream, and thereby spare the magicians, the Chaldeans, and with whom they were themselves to perish, to die, from the king's anger, by enabling him to announce his vision, allowing him to announce his vision, and to make manifest, to make revealed what the king had seen the night before in his sleep, but had forgotten it. Accordingly, the Most High, out of pity to those that were in danger, and out of regard or care to the wisdom of Daniel, made known to him the dream and its interpretation, its understanding, that so the king might understand by him its signification also. When Daniel had received this knowledge from Ahiah, he arose very joyful, and told it to his brethren, his family, and made them glad. He made his family happy, and to hope well that they should now they should be keep their lives, of which they despaired before. They was all nervous and scared before, afraid, and had their minds full of nothing but the thoughts of dying. That's what's going on now with the media. So when he had with them returned thanks to Ahiah, who had commiserated their youth, when it was day, he came to Arach and desired him to bring him to the king, because he would discover to him that dream which he had seen the night before. Now, when Daniel was come into the king, he excused himself first, that he did not pretend to be wiser than the other Chaldeans and magicians, when upon their entire inability to discover his dream, they couldn't find it out, he was undertaken to inform him of it. For this was not by his own skill or account of his having better cultivated his understanding than the rest, but he said, the Most High have pity upon us when we were in danger of death, and when I prayed for the life of myself and of those of my own nation. I'm going to read that again. He said, I pray for the life of myself and those of my own nation, my own people, and have made manifest, he had made revealed to me both the dream and the interpretation of the dream. For I was not less concerned for for thy glory than for the sorrow that we were by you condemned, by thee condemned to die, while you did so unjustly command men, both good and excellent in themselves, to be put to death, to be killed. When you enjoined us, asked them to do what was entirely above the reach of human wisdom, and required ask of them what was only the work of the Most High? Wherefore, as you in your sleep was solicitous concerning those that should succeed the government of the whole world, the Most High was desirous to show you all those that should reign after you. Mm, interesting. Let me go back. It says, hmm, it says, wherefore, as you in your sleep was solicitous concerning those that should succeed the government of the whole world, the Most High was desirous to show you. He wanted to show you all those that should rule after you, and to that end exhibited to you the following dream. You seemest to see a great image standing before you, Nebuchadnezzar, the head of which proved to be of gold, the shoulders and arms of silver, and the belly and thigh of brass, but the legs and feet of iron. After which you saw a stone broken off from a mountain, which fell upon the image, and threw it down, and brake it to pieces, and did not allow any part of it to remain whole, that means complete. But the gold and the silver, the brass and the iron became smaller than meal, which upon the blast of a violent wind was by force carried away and scattered abroad everywhere. But the stone did increase in such a degree, it got bigger, that the whole earth beneath it seemed to be filled therewith with it. This is the dream which you sawest, and its interpretation is as follows. The head of gold denotes you, Nebuchadnezzar, and the kings of Babylon that have been before thee. But the two hands and arms signify this, that your government will be dissolved. That means removed, um, destroyed by two kings. All right. But another king that shall come from the west, armed with brass, shall destroy that government. And another government that shall be like unto iron shall put an end to the power of the former, the old, and shall have dominion, rulership over all the earth, on account, on record of the nature of iron, which is stronger than that of gold, and of silver, and of brass. Daniel did also announce or declare, report the meaning of the stone to the king. But I do not think proper to relate, says Josephus. Um, Let me read the note real quick. It says, of the most remarkable passage in Josephus concerning the stone cut out of the mountain and destroying the image, which he would not explain, but imitated to be a prophecy of futurity, and probably not safe for him to explain, as belonging to the destruction of the Roman Empire by Yeshua, by Christ, the true Messiah of the Israelites. Take the words um, of Haverkamp 10:4. Nor is this to be wondered at, that he would not now meddle with things of the future, for he had no mind to provoke the Romans by speaking of the destruction of that city, which they call the eternal city. Right? So he knew this. He didn't speak on it, but he knew what was going to happen in the future. And we know that stone that was bigger and larger to such a degree that it covered the whole earth and all of that. It was showing as Christ when he comes. Um, um, what is that? Let me read it real quick. Isaiah 9:6, it says, for unto us, the Israelites, the child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be upon his shoulder. All right, because he's coming to rid all this government crap. All right, that Satan set up. All right, so um, I just thought I would read that little note because I read it before and it was awesome. All right, so um, Yeshua, the true Messiah, right, of the Israelites, is gonna come back and destroy the Roman Empire, right? That still continues to this day, all right, which is Babylon, aka America, all right. So let's go back to it real quick. Let me get it. Daniel did announce the meaning of the stone to the king, but I do not think proper to announce it, since I have only undertaken to describe things past or things present, or things in history in the past, or things present current, but not things that are future. Yet if anyone be so very desirous of knowing truth as not to waive or doubt such points of curiosity, and cannot curb his inclination, his mind, his thoughts, for understanding the uncertainties of future, and whether they will happen or not, let him be diligent, right? Let him be quick, fast, in a hurry, and ready. I'm sorry, and reading the book of Daniel, obviously, because Daniel brought out the truth, which he will find among the sacred writings. So you will find it among the sacred writings of Daniel. All right. So you read Daniel, and you know what's going to happen in the future, because none of none of he's divinely inspired, and none of the prophecies fell. All right, that the Most High written. All right, now um, chapter 5. When Nebuchadnezzar heard this and recollected and remembered his dream, he was astonished. He was shocked at the nature of Daniel, and fell upon his face and saluted Daniel in a manner that men worship God, the Most High, and gave command that he should be sacrificed to as a power. And this was not all, for he also imposed the name of his own God, his own power upon him, Daniel, and that's why he calls Daniel Belteshazzar, and made him and his kinsmen, his family, rulers of his whole kingdom, which kinsmen of his happened to fall into great danger by Daniel's family fell into great danger by the envy of malice of their enemies, for they offended the king upon the occasion following the event happening, or following. This is how it happened. He made an image of gold, the height which was 60 cubits, and its breadth 6 cubits, and set it in the great plain of Babylon. And when he was going to dedicate the image, he invited the principal men out of all the earth that were under his dominions, and commanded them in the first place that when they should hear the sound of the trumpet, they should then fall down and worship the image. And he threatened that those who did not do so should be thrown, that means cast, into a fiery furnace. When therefore all the rest, upon the hearing of the sound of the trumpet, worship the image. All right. They relate that Daniel's kinsman family did not do it. That's right. Because they would not transgress, that means break the laws, the commands of their country. So these men were convicted and cast, they was thrown immediately into the fire, but were saved by divine providence, all right, but by um, divine care, the Most High, and after a surprising manner escaped death, for the fire did not touch them, and I suppose that it touched them not, as if it reasoned with itself that they were thrown into it without any fault of theirs, they were innocent, and that therefore it was too weak to burn the young men when they were in it. This was done by the power of Ahiah, who made their bodies so far superior to the fire that it could not consume them. This it was which recommended them to the king as righteous men. I'm sorry, this it was which recommended them to the king as righteous men, and men beloved of the Most High, on which account they continued in great esteem with him. 6. A little after this, the king saw in his sleep again another vision, how he should fall from his dominion and feed among the wild beasts, and that when he had lived in this manner in the desert for 7 years, he should recover his dominion again. When he had seen this dream, he called the magicians together again and asked of them about it. He asked or desired them to tell what it signified. But when none of them could find the meaning of the dream, he discovered it to the king, and Daniel was the only person that explained it. And as he foretold, so it came to pass. And after he had continued in the wilderness for the aforementioned interval of time, while one while no one durst attempt to seize his kingdom during these 7 years, he prayed to the Most High that he might recover his kingdom and be returned to it. But let no one blame me for writing down everything of this nature, as I find it in our ancient books. For as to that matter, I have plainly assured those that think me defective in any such point or complain of my management. And he told them in the beginning of this history that I intend to do no more than translate the Hebrew books into the Greek language and promised them to explain those facts without adding anything to them of my own or taking anything away from them. That's what um, Josephus is letting you know. All right. So now we're gonna go on and skip ahead a little bit. Um, let's let's jump to 10, 11, and 5. Uh, Book 10, chapter 11, verse 5, in the Antiquity of the Jews. However, while Daniel was in so great dignity and in so great favor with Darius, was alone entrusted with everything by him as having somewhat divine in him. He was envied by the rest, for those that see others in greater honor than themselves with kings envy them. And when those that were grieved at the great favor Daniel was in with Darius, he sought for an occasion against him. He afforded them no occasion at all, for he was above all the temptations of money, and hated bribery, and encouraged it a very base, low thing to take anything by way of reward, even when it might be justly given him. He afforded those that envied him not the least handle for an occasion. So when they could find nothing for which they might calumniate, plan, or calumniate him to the king, nothing that was shameful or reproachful, and thereby deprive him of the honor he was in with him, they sought for some other way, whereby they might destroy him, Daniel. When therefore they saw that Daniel prayed to the Most High 3 times a day, they thought they had gotten an occasion by which they might ruin him. So they came to Darius and told him that the princes and governors had thought proper to allow the multitude a relaxation for 30 days, that no one might offer a petition or prayer either to himself or to the gods, but that he who shall transgress this decree, this law, shall be thrown into a den of lions, and there perish, die. Whereupon the king, not being acquainted, familiar with their wicked design, plan, nor suspecting that it was a contrivance of theirs against Daniel, said he was pleased, he was happy with this announcement of theirs decree, and he promised to confirm what they desired. He also published an edict to promulgate to the people that decree which the princes had made. Accordingly, all the rest took care not to transgress, to break those injunctions, and rested in quiet. But Daniel had no care to them, to those laws, but or edicts, decrees. But as he was wont, he stood and prayed to Ahiah in the sight of all them, in the sight of them all. I'm sorry. But the princes, having met with this occasion, they so earnestly sought to find against Daniel, came presently to the king and accused him that Daniel was the only person that transgressed the decree, while not one of the rest durst pray to their gods, their powers. This discovery they made, and not because of his impiety, his disrespect, but because they had watched him and observed him out of envy. For supposing that Darius did this out of a greater kindness to him than they expected, and that he was ready to grant him a pardon for his contempt of his injunctions, and envying this very pardon, forgiveness to Daniel, they did not become more favorable to him, but desired, wanted that he might be thrown into the den of lions, according to the law. So Darius, hoping that the Most High would deliver him, and that he would undergo nothing that was terrible by the wild beasts, told him, bear this accident cheerfully. Take this accident cheerfully. And when he was thrown into the den, he put his seal to the stone that lay upon the mouth of the den, and went his way. But he passed all the night without food, Darius, and without sleep, being in great distress for Daniel. He was very depressed, sad for Daniel. But when it was day, he got up, he rose up, and he came to the den, and found the seal entire, complete, not broken, which he had left the stone sealed withal. He also opened the seal, he broke the seal, he unlocked it, and cried out and called to Daniel and asked him if he were alive. And as soon as he heard the king's voice, and said that he had suffered no harm, the king gave order that he should be drawn up out of the den. Now, when his enemies saw that Daniel had suffered nothing which was terrible, they would not own that he was preserved by Ahiah, the Most High, and by his providence, his care, but they said that the lions had been filled full with food. Oh wow. And on that account, it was as they supposed that the lions would not touch Daniel, nor come to him. And this they alleged to the king. But the king, out of an abhorrence, a hate of their wickedness, gave order that they should throw in a great deal of flesh to the lions. And when they had filled themselves, he gave further order that Daniel's enemies should be cast, that means thrown, into the den, that he might learn whether the lions, and now they were full, oof, and would touch them or not. And it appeared plain to Darius after the princes had been thrown to the wild beasts, animals, that it was the Most High, it was Christ, who preserved Daniel, actually. For the lions spared none of them, but tore them all to pieces. All right. I'm gonna read the note real quick. Let's read it. It says, "It is no way improbable that Daniel's enemies might suggest this reason to the king, why the lions did not meddle with him, and that they might suspect the king's kindness to Daniel had procured these lions to be so filled beforehand, and that then it was that he encouraged Daniel to submit to this experiment in hopes of coming off safe, and that this was the true reason of making so terrible an experiment upon those his enemies and all their families." Daniel 6:24. Though other copies do not directly take notice of it. All right, so we go back. It says the Most High, or if we know that it was Christ who preserved Daniel. For the lions spared none of them, all right, his enemies, but tore them all to pieces as if they had been very hungry and wanted, that means needed food. I suppose, therefore, it was not their hunger which had been a little before satisfied with abundance, a lot of flesh, a lot of food, a lot of body, but the wickedness of these men that provoked them to destroy the princes. For if it so pleased the Most High that wickedness might, by even those irrational creatures, be esteemed a plain foundation for their punishment. All right. Mm. When therefore those that had intended now to destroy Daniel by treachery were themselves destroyed, King Darius sent letters all over all the country and praised the Most High whom Daniel worshipped, and said that he was the only true power, the highest, and had all power. And he had also Daniel in very great esteem, respect, and made him the principal of his friends. Now, when Daniel was become so illustrious and famous on account of opinion, men had of men, and had that he was beloved of the Most High, he built a tower at Akbatane in Media, and it was a most elegant building and wonderfully made, and it is still remaining and preserved to this day. All right, so I'm gonna jump down um, 266 in that paragraph. Um, but it is fit to give an account of what this man did. Josephus said it's right to give account, the record of what this man did, Daniel, which is most admirable to hear, for he was so happy as to have strange revelations made to him, and those as to one of the greatest of the prophets, insomuch that while he was alive he had the esteem and applause both of the kings and of the multitude, the crowd. And now he is dead, he retains a remembrance that will never fail. For the several books that he wrote and left behind him are still read by us till this time. And from them we believe that Daniel conversed with the Most High. For he did not only prophesy of the future events, as did other prophets, but he also determined the time of their accomplishment. So Daniel will help you with the time of the end if you seek it. And while the prophets used to foretell misfortunes on on the account were disagreeable both to the kings and to the multitude, Daniel was to them a prophet of good things, and this to such a degree that by the agreeable nature of his predictions, he procured the good will of all men, and by the accomplishment of them, he procured the belief of their truth. and the opinion of a sort of divinity for himself among the multitude. He also wrote and left behind him what made manifest the accuracy and undeniable veracity of his predictions. For he said that when he was in Susa, the metropolis of Persia, and went out into the field with his companions, there was on a sudden a motion and concussion of the earth, and that he was left alone by himself, his friends flying away from him, and that he was disturbed and fell on his face and on his two hands, and that a certain person touched him, and at the same time told him, "Get up and see what will happen, will befall his countrymen after many generations, many times, years, ages." He also related that when he stood up, he was shown a great ram with many horns growing out of his head, and the last was higher than the rest. That after this he looked to the west and saw a he goat carried through the air from that quarter, that he rushed upon the ram with violence, and he hit him twice with his horns, and overthrew him to the ground, and trampled upon him. That afterwards he saw a very great horn head growing out of the head of the he goat. All right, that means a government. And that when it was broken off, four horns grew up that were exposed to each of the four winds. All right, and he wrote that out of them arose another lesser horn, government. All right, which, as he said, waxed great, waxed strong, and that the Most High showed to him that it should fight against his nation, his people, and take their city by force and bring the temple worship to confusion, to a lie, and forbid the sacrifices to be offered for 1,296 days. Daniel wrote that he saw these visions in the plain of Susa. He have informed us that the Most High interpreted the appearance of this vision after the following manner. He said that the ram signified the kingdoms of the Medes, Iran, and Persians, and the horns, those kings that were to reign in them, and that the last horn signified the last king, and that he should exceed all the kings in riches and glory. That the he goat signified the one should come and rule from the Greeks, probably Alexander, who should twice fight with the Persians and overcome him in battle, and should receive his entire dominion, rulership. That by the great horn, which sprang out of the forehead of the he goat, was meant the first king, and that a springing up of four horns upon its falling off, the conversion of every one of them to the four quarters of the earth, signified the successors that should arise after the death of the first king. And that was Alexander, and then it went to Ptolemy and those four kings, and the partition of the kingdom among them, and that they should be neither his children nor of his kindred family, that should rule over the habitable earth for many years, and that from among them there should arise a certain king that should overcome our nation and their laws, and should take away our political government, and should spoil, that means rob the temple, the churches, and forbid the sacrifices to be offered for 3 years' time. And indeed, it so came to pass that our nation suffered these things under Antiochus Epiphanes, according to Daniel's vision. All right, in the Maccabees, and what he wrote many years before there came to pass. In the very same manner, Daniel also wrote concerning the Roman government, and that our country should be made empty by them, destroyed by them. All these things did this man leave in writing, as the Most High had showed them to him, and so much that such as read his prophecies and see how they have been fulfilled would wonder at the honor wherewith the Most High honored Daniel, and made then discover how the Epicureans are in error, they're in wrong, who cast care out of human life and do not believe that the Most High takes care of the business of the world, nor that the universe is governed and continued in being by the blessed immortal nature, but say that the world is carried along of its own accord without a ruler and a creator, which, were it destitute of a guide to conduct, as they imagine, it would be like ships without pilots, which we see drawn by the winds, or like chariots without drivers, which are overturned. So would the world be dashed to pieces by its being carried without a care, and so died, perished, and came to nothing. So that by the aforementioned predictions of Daniel, those men seem to me very much to err from the truth, who determined that God exercises no care over human affairs, business. For it that were the case, that the world went on by mechanical necessity. If that was the case, the world would be would went on by mechanical need, and we should not see that all things would come to pass according to his prophecy. Now, as to myself, I have so described these matters as I have found them and read them. But if anyone is inclined to another opinion about them, let him enjoin his different sentiments without any blame from me. All right. So um, that's that on Daniel. Some of the history and understanding on Daniel. I wanted to go into the different operations and stuff, um, things like that, and so that'll be my next thing I'm gonna go into. I'm gonna go into these manifestations, these operations of Hashtan, Satan. Okay, these many different affirmations and forms that he's taken and using to go against the righteous and to confuse us. And so Daniel, going into Daniel, I was just showing you how wise and all Daniel was, and how he didn't allow um, Satan to confuse him, and he was very disciplined and things of that nature. All right, so hopefully that was some good understanding on that. There was one note that I didn't go into. Let me try to get that real quick. I think it's important. Just on the eunuch things, because people might have a different feeling on the eunuch thing. It says that Daniel was made one of these eunuchs, of which Isaiah prophesied in Isaiah 39:7. And the three children and his companions also seems to me plain, both here in Josephus and in other copies of Daniel, Daniel 1:3, Daniel 1, 6, 7, 11, and 18. Although it must be granted that some married persons that had children were sometimes called eunuchs in a general exception for courtiers, on account that so many of the ancient courtiers were real eunuchs. All right, and see that you see that in Genesis 39. All right, so I was just bringing that out on the eunuchs. All right, because there's the different definition, but um, I didn't know that Daniel was that, so I thought that was interesting too. All right, so the next thing I'm gonna get into is these operations. All right.